The wreckage lay scattered across a Belgian farmer's field. Twisted metal still smoked in the afternoon sun. Captain Werner Schroer's fighter had disintegrated in seconds. The aluminum skin showed holes the size of a man's thumb. This was the signature of 50-caliber machine gun fire. Within hours, German ground crews arrived. They searched for clues about what went wrong. The evidence told a disturbing story. Previous encounters with British fighters showed scattered hits. This was different. This was systematic destruction from impossible firepower. Word spread quickly through German fighter squadrons. Veteran pilots studied intelligence reports with growing fear. If Schroer could be brought down so easily, these American barrels needed serious attention. Major Hans Philipp recognized the threat first. He had over 200 victories. "These Americans are not flying Spitfires," he warned. "Whatever these machines are, they fight by different rules." His words proved prophetic in ways he never imagined. But the story began months earlier. The morning sky over occupied Belgium promised death on April 15, 1943. At 25,000 feet, the air cut sharp and cold. Captain Werner Schroer adjusted his canopy. He scanned the horizon through his Messerschmitt Bf 1009. The German ace had 27 confirmed kills painted beneath his cockpit. 27 American and British pilots who would never see home. Today he felt confident about adding to that number. Then he saw them. He couldn't believe his eyes. Instead of nimble Spitfires or sleek Mustangs, he saw something impossible. Massive, bulbous machines that looked like flying bathtubs. They appeared more like jokes than instruments of war. Schroer keyed his radio. Amusement and disbelief filled his voice. "The Americans are flying barrels," he said to his squadron. Other German pilots began to chuckle. Some laughed outright. After years facing Britain's finest fighters, this seemed too easy. These aircraft were Republic P-47C Thunderbolts, the very first of their kind to darken European skies. To experienced German fighter pilots, they looked like engineering failures. Compared to the sharp lines of a Messerschmitt, these American machines appeared hopeless. Compared to elegant curves of a Focke-Wulf 190, they seemed outmatched. But appearances would prove devastatingly wrong. The P-47 had been born from desperation and genius. In 1939, war clouds gathered over Europe. American military planners faced a terrifying gap. Reports from France and Britain painted a grim picture. The German Luftwaffe was cutting through Allied defenses like wheat. Alexander Kartveli saw this with growing alarm. The Georgian engineer worked for Republic Aviation. A refugee who fled his homeland from Bolsheviks, he understood what was at stake. America needed a fighter that could match German machines. More than match them, exceed them completely. The challenge seemed impossible. The Army Air Corps wanted 400 miles per hour at 25,000 feet. They wanted 6, preferably 8, 50-caliber machine guns. They needed cockpit armor, self-sealing fuel tanks, and extended range capability. Most designers would have given up. The requirements seemed impossible to meet. More guns meant more weight. More armor meant less speed. More fuel meant a larger, less nimble aircraft. But Kartveli saw opportunity, where others saw defeat. His solution was simple and audacious. Instead of building a lightweight fighter, he would build the heaviest single-seat fighter ever. He would wrap it around the most powerful engine available. The Pratt & Whitney R2800 double-wasp radial engine produced 2,000 horsepower. When the first prototype rolled out, even his colleagues were doubtful. The XP-47B weighed nearly 10,000 pounds empty. It was 65% heavier than its predecessors. It looked massive, almost brutish. British pilots later joked that a pilot could defend himself by running around inside it. Kartveli himself acknowledged the aircraft's odd appearance. "It will be a dinosaur," he admitted, "but it will be a dinosaur with good proportions." Those proportions included something legendary: 8 Browning ANM-2 50-caliber machine guns, 4 in each wing. Each gun fed from ammunition boxes containing 350 rounds. Together, these weapons could deliver over 100 rounds per second. When triggered together, they could put 500 rounds into a 3-foot target at 1,100 feet, all in just 5 seconds. The ammunition itself was remarkable. M2 ball rounds for general damage, M8 armor-piercing rounds that punched through steel and set fuel on fire, M10 tracer rounds let pilots see where shots went. Each round weighed nearly 2 ounces. They traveled at over 2,700 feet per second. But firepower was only part of the design revolution. The aircraft's massive size provided unprecedented survival capability. The air-cooled radial engine could absorb tremendous damage and keep running. Unlike liquid-cooled engines that seized up when hit, the R-2800 could lose cylinders and still fly home. The first P-47B models reached Army Air Force squadrons in March 1942. The 56th Fighter Group, commanded by Lieutenant Colonel Hubert "Hub" Zemke, got the new fighters first. Zemke was a combat veteran. He had served as an observer with the Royal Air Force during the Battle of Britain. He understood the challenges his pilots would face. The transition was jarring. Pilots used to nimble fighters suddenly wrestled with a flying locomotive. The controls were heavy. Visibility from the cockpit was poor. The aircraft seemed to lumber rather than dance. During training, the 56th Fighter Group lost 18 pilots and 41 aircraft in accidents. The Thunderbolt was unforgiving to inexperienced hands. Its weight and power demanded respect and precision. Some pilots washed out completely. But Zemke kept going. He knew wars were won by effective weapons, not pretty airplanes. He developed new tactics around the Thunderbolt's unique traits. Instead of traditional dogfighting, his pilots would use their strengths: devastating firepower, incredible diving speed, almost supernatural damage absorption. By November 1942, the 56th Fighter Group was ready for combat. They boarded HMS Queen Elizabeth for the Atlantic crossing. They left their war-weary P-47B models behind. When they arrived in Britain, a surprise waited. Brand new P-47C Thunderbolts, the latest and most refined version. The P-47C fixed lessons from the earlier B model. It had improved flight characteristics from an 8-inch fuselage extension. This moved the center of gravity. The metal rudder replaced the fabric unit that caused dangerous flutter. New radio equipment and oxygen systems made high-altitude operations more reliable. Most importantly, the C model could carry external stores. Bombs or drop tanks extended its range deep into German territory. For the first time, American bombers would have fighter escort throughout their missions. The British reception was mixed. Royal Air Force pilots used to elegant Spitfires and Hurricanes looked at Thunderbolts with doubt. The American fighters were huge and ungainly. They seemed to violate every principle of fighter design from the Battle of Britain. Don Blakely transferred from Eagle Squadron to the 4th Fighter Group. He was blunt in his assessment. "It ought to be able to dive," he said. "It certainly can't climb." His comment reflected widespread belief. The Thunderbolt's size and weight would make it easy prey for experienced German pilots. What they didn't understand was different design philosophy. British fighters were built for defensive operations over home territory, short engagements where fuel capacity mattered less. The American fighter was built for offensive operations deep in enemy territory. Staying power and firepower would prove more important than pure agility. First combat missions began in April 1943. Initially, these were cautious sweeps over occupied Europe. They familiarized American pilots with combat conditions while testing aircraft capabilities. German response was muted at first. Luftwaffe intelligence officers monitored radio intercepts and analyzed gun camera footage. They were puzzled by these new American fighters. German pilots had developed effective tactics against Spitfires and Hurricanes. They knew exactly how to exploit British fighter weaknesses. Limited ammunition capacity, relatively light armament, vulnerability to sustained damage. But these new American aircraft operated by different rules. On April 15, 1943, those different rules would be tested in deadly combat. Captain Werner Schroer and his squadron were about to learn that their contempt for flying barrels would cost them dearly. The encounter began with positioning and patience. German fighters climbed from bases in occupied Belgium. They had the advantage of operating over friendly territory. They could choose when and where to engage. They had confidence from months of successful operations. Schroer's squadron climbed toward the approaching American formation. The P-47C Thunderbolts kept their course and altitude. They seemed unaware of the threat below. To German pilots, this confirmed their assessment. Inexperienced pilots in inferior aircraft. But Lieutenant Robert Johnson, flying one of the Thunderbolts, was anything but inexperienced. The 22-year-old from Oklahoma had completed training with distinction. He had studied German tactics during squadron preparation. He knew Germans typically attacked from below and behind. They used superior climbing ability to gain position before striking. Johnson also knew something German pilots didn't. His P-47C could dive faster and hit harder than anything in the Luftwaffe. As Schroer's formation began its attack, Johnson was planning his response. The German attack began with textbook precision. Schroer's pilots split into two groups. They planned to bracket the American formation and attack from multiple angles. It was a tactic that worked countless times against British fighters. Those pilots would try to turn and fight, playing into German hands. But the American pilots didn't turn to fight. They did something that caught Germans completely off guard. They dove. The P-47C Thunderbolts suddenly nosed over and began accelerating toward Earth. They reached speeds that seemed impossible for such large aircraft. German pilots expected a traditional turning fight. Instead, they found themselves chasing targets that rapidly pulled away. Schroer pushed his Messerschmitt into a steep dive. Even his sleek fighter couldn't match the acceleration of the much heavier American machines. As distance opened between formations, German pilots realized their fundamental mistake. These weren't the lumbering targets they expected. These were purpose-built fighting machines designed to exploit situations exactly like this. Johnson monitored his airspeed as it climbed past 400 miles per hour. He waited for the perfect moment. German fighters were strung out in pursuit and losing position. They were now vulnerable to exactly the attack Thunderbolts were designed to deliver. He hauled back on his stick and pulled into a climbing turn. This brought him directly into Schroer's path. For a brief moment, the aircraft were on converging courses. Johnson's .850 caliber machine guns bore directly on the German fighter. Johnson's thumb found the firing button. What happened next shattered every assumption German fighter pilots had made about American fighters. The concentrated firepower of .850 caliber machine guns created destruction unlike anything Germans had encountered. Each gun fired over 800 rounds per minute. Armor-piercing rounds tore through the Messerschmitt's thin aluminum skin like paper. Ball ammunition shattered structural components and severed control cables. Tracer rounds set fuel vapors ablaze. Schroer's aircraft disintegrated around him. One moment he flew a precision instrument of war. The next, he rode burning debris toward Earth. The German ace barely had time to register what happened before his fighter entered an unrecoverable spin. Pieces of wing and fuselage trailed behind like deadly confetti. Other German pilots watched in stunned disbelief. One of their most experienced leaders had fallen victim to an aircraft they dismissed as harmless. The psychological impact was immediate and devastating. If Werner Schroer, with his 27 victories and years of combat experience, could be destroyed so easily, what chance did they have? The answer was becoming clear. These American barrels were not easy targets. They were something entirely new. Fighters designed not for elegant aerial duels, but for brutal industrial-scale air combat. The engagement that began with German laughter ended with German fighters scattered and demoralized. They fled toward home bases with new respect for American engineering. But this was only the beginning. Over coming months, the P-47C Thunderbolt would prove again and again that appearances could be fatally wrong. The legend of the Jug had been born in fire over occupied Europe. For German fighter pilots who had taunted it, that legend would become their nightmare. The war in the air was about to change forever. The success sent shockwaves through American and German commands. For Americans, it validated years of design work and training. For Germans, it represented something ominous. Their technological and tactical superiority might not be absolute. Lieutenant Robert Johnson became the center of attention when he returned to base. His gun camera footage was analyzed frame by frame. It provided valuable intelligence about .50 caliber fire effectiveness. The films showed devastating impact on German aircraft. These images would train other American pilots, but Johnson's victory was more than tactical success. It was proof of concept for entirely new air warfare. Traditional emphasis on climbing and turning gave way to new doctrine. Firepower, durability, and strategic flexibility became paramount. The P-47C Thunderbolt embodied these principles in ways that would change how air battles were fought forever.